Welcome back to the Porch. Last week we started a series on being confident in crisis. And we were talking about Isaiah 6 1 and Isaiah seeing the Lord high and lifted up and his train filling the temple. So, it's like his glory, his robe, his kingly robe. And we got to, talk about a little bit about the heavenly dragon species called seraphim, which I would love to geek out on one day. But it was about Isaiah seeing this the year that King Uzziah died, who was a king for 52 years. And that transition, that change, creating a little bit of a crisis in confidence and stress for him, and how that kind of applies to us today. Recent statistic that I saw from the CDC, this is not some weird organization or anything. It was a study done at the end of June by the CDC, which said that 25% of all young adults had seriously considered suicide this year. And so, whether you think that this is much of a crisis or not, and listen, as a country, we have been through way worse, survived way worse. But we have the situation with COVID, and we could talk about the percentages of people with pre-existing medical conditions and the ages of most of the people who have died from it, and compared to other seasons. And you could talk about whether it is a real crisis or not. And the demonstrations and rioting and different things. So I'm not putting those together. But there are things that the demonstrations seem to may have been hijacked by more radical elements. And the burnings of the buildings and businesses and people that have been killed, whether that's a national crisis yet or not. And then we have the elections coming up here in just a couple months too. So a lot of people, and apparently a lot of young people, are really stressed out by what's going on. And that was a study from 18 to 24-year-olds. And I just want to talk about that a little bit, that we are people who are supposed to be confident in crisis. I was reading this morning in Job 29 and how he's going through tremendous. Okay, that's a real crisis. It's a real problem what he's going through, the difficulties that he's through, and he's saying how I long for the months gone by. And then he talks about all of he even describes it as the olive oil pouring out of rocks for him. That was so easy. And a lot of times when we look back, nostalgia takes over, and we don't really create an accurate historical picture for ourselves the way things were in the past. But it's kind of a place of hating the moment, and there is a complete loss of hope. We, as the people of God, the children of God, the followers of Jesus, are to be hopeful, irritatingly optimistic people. We have the hope of our future always being better. Our best days are yet to come. And whenever we get into situations sometimes that can be stressful or feels like a crisis, we can have a loss of confidence in God's goodness for you, and for us. We get into situations where our faith is being tested many times. And we can start thinking or believing that our best days are ahead, and we lose the power of hope. Transition, any kind of change or transition, means that there's a loss. There's something that's being lost, but there's generally also something that's also being gained. And we will tend to focus, on the glass being half empty, potentially. And if we have gotten our eyes off of Jesus, it's like Peter walking on water. I mean, look, no other disciple walked on water. Peter did. And so we kind of give him a hard time for, he got his eyes off Jesus. He started to doubt. He got fearful. And fear is the enemy of faith. And started to sink. But he's still the only disciple that walked on water. And he had enough courage when he was looking at Jesus to step out of the boat, which had to be one big step. I'm telling you. Talk about one small leap for man, one giant leap for mankind, whatever, like they said on the moon. Stepping out on a stormy ocean out of the boat. That's pretty good. Um, so we've had so many Christians who have been through so many, and throughout history, so many different challenging things that shook their confidence, and they couldn't. We're not like God. We can't see the future, but we have a God who, as I said last week, is large and in charge. That's what Isaiah saw. So he's concerned, and then God shows him a picture of himself. And that's the image that we have to hang on to. Satan comes to steal, kill, and destroy, and we can kind of focus on that. But sometimes we forget the next part of that verse. The enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And then Jesus is speaking and says, but I have come that you may have life and have it abundantly. So he's saying this general statement. So the devil has these general big plans of destruction and theft and death. And it says, but for you, Jesus is saying, for you, I have come that you might have life and have it to the full. So he goes from these general things of the devil to a very personalized statement of the Lord for each one of us. So we are to be hopeful. Our best days are ahead, and we look through the curve, and almost got hit in the head by hummingbirds. Sorry. And we need to ask the Lord for eyes to see. Think of that. Think of the stat I said a minute ago. 25%, 1 in 4 young adults have seriously considered suicide this year. That's a very disturbing statistic. And what that tells me is they are around people, they're looking, adolescence kind of goes well into your 20s, maybe to 30 now, right? Just the way things work. That they are looking toward the people who should be their mentors. And they're not seeing hope. They're not seeing confidence, and which is ridiculous. Our best days are ahead. Jesus said, I will build my church, and remember the gates of hell will not prevail against it. It's not going to conquer it. And the Lord has not stopped building his church. He's not stopped building his kingdom. And all the stuff that's going on in this world, which is really not that big. It could get big, but right now it's not really that big compared to things that we've gone through in the past. They're a transition for us. And we should be looking with the eyes of the Lord, keep our eyes on him, and seeing what he is doing, and have total and complete confidence and be optimistic people looking forward to tomorrow. Right? And it makes me worry. Think, well, if that's going on with the 18 to 24-year-olds, what's happening but with the 14 to 18-year-olds, And the people around us, whoever they are, if they know that we're followers of Jesus, they should see us responding to whatever is going on in this nation with optimism. The kingdom is being built. If your identity is in the kingdom of God and a citizen of heaven, then you are optimistic. It is a kingdom that will never end and never fail. And that's where our citizenship is. Jesus is present. Paul said, now abides faith, hope, and love, right? And so we should have faith for the past, that God was there, that God is using it for our benefit, that he has done what he said he's done, that the cross is true, that Jesus is real. And then we have love in the moment, that we are to live in this place of loving our neighbor, loving our enemies. That's a good word for the political season. Loving our enemies because we have confidence in God and we love him. And then we have hope for the future. And this power of hope in our life will create a question in the people that know us. As Paul says, Always be ready to give an answer for the hope that you have. Well, they have to be able to see our hope. So, oh, last week I used a phrase also, Bob's your uncle. I'm going to have to explain that a little bit. Old phrase, it's a guy who appointed an unqualified person to a ministry position. He was a government leader. This is in Britain. And people were like, why did he point him? And then they realized this guy was this other guy's uncle. His name was Robert. And it's like, oh, Bob's your uncle. And so it's sort of like saying, voila. So we have confidence in the future because we know, oh, this is an old phrase. What a cliche. Because we know who holds the future. So there you go. Bob's your uncle.